Welcome to Close Up Talk Radio, the unique internet broadcast series that brings you together with some of the most amazing, important, and interesting individuals from the worlds of business, industry, travel, art, and entertainment, from company owners, CEOs, and presidents, to the technical wizards behind the scenes who create the magic that make their company's products and services so special. Here is your opportunity to hear firsthand the fascinating stories of how it all happened from those who actually made it possible. This is Close Up Talk Radio. Well, hello, everybody. We welcome you back to Close Up Talk Radio. I'm Doug Llewelyn, your host. It's a real pleasure to have you back with us again today. This is going to be pretty interesting, I'm convinced. We're going to be talking about the subject of addiction. And if you or any one of your good friends or loved ones has an addiction problem, I think you should pull up the chair and listen very closely because you're going to get some very good information. You know, it's interesting. John Lennon once said, whatever gets you through the night, well, it's all right. But when you cope with drugs or alcohol, obviously such behavior can quickly spiral into full-blown addiction. And to fully understand addiction, you first have to understand the role that brain chemistry plays as you progress from use to abuse and finally to dependency. And apparently it has nothing to do with a lack of willpower or discipline. At least that's what our guest, Counselor Diebold, says. He points out that when you reach the point of dependency, the brain has actually changed its chemistry and it's unable to change back. In order to eliminate the unhealthy behaviors, you got to find the reasons why they are coping inappropriately. Well, it's a real pleasure to have our guest with us today. His name is DJ Diebold. He is a counselor headquartered in Arizona, board-certified, state-licensed behavioral health therapist, and he's the founder of Diebold Behavioral Counseling. He has over 30 years of experience in addiction counseling, and he empowers his clients to achieve their personal goals for recovery through clarity, through honesty, and also through compassion. It's a very complex subject to deal with, folks, and it's something that a lot of people have problems with. Some people can shake it and fairly quickly. Others, it takes months and even years. So let us welcome our guest, DJ Diebold, to the mic. DJ, welcome. It's a real pleasure to have you from your headquarters out in Mesa, Arizona. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Doug. Thank you for having me.
Well, look, it's a real pleasure to have you. This is such a worthwhile subject to talk about because it's something so many people deal with. And you know, it's always good to hear from someone's perspective who has the kind of experience that you do. And you know, you've been able to help so many people. So let's talk a little bit about what your theories are for helping people who have addiction problems. And I know people come to you not just for alcohol or for drug abuse. They come to you for depression counseling, even anxiety counseling, things of that nature, trauma counseling. You are a true counselor for all kinds of addiction. But my guess is alcohol and drug abuse probably is the most popular. Would that be right? You deal with that more than anything else, or those issues?
Yeah, particularly alcohol. It's still the number one abused drug for a lot of reasons.
Well, when you say a lot of reasons, go ahead.
Yeah, Doug, there's almost no families out there, and I really mean it. Statistically speaking, there's no families out there that don't have a drug or alcohol problem, and I mean virtually zero. It's become, unfortunately, it's become normal, not only a normal way to cope, but it's become a normal way to relax, and what people just don't get until it's too late is that it changes the brain, and once we cross over from abuse into dependency, it's really like the brain is a rubber band, and it's been stretched out either once too often or 500 times too often.
Yeah. You know, I wanted to point. It does, definitely it does, and I think you're right. I would agree with you that there's almost no family out there that has not been touched by this in one way or another, or is being touched currently. And I think it always is important and interesting to hear about someone's background who is helping those who have these problems. I know that you have written that you have had problems with alcohol and with drugs. But as you put it, you never crossed over into dependency. And I'm wondering how you were able to avoid that.
Well, in some ways it was just blind luck, and in other ways, I always trusted that gut feeling that told me, DJ, you're getting close to the part of the frozen lake where the ice is getting thin, and you better back off for a while. And I quit for maybe a month, but unfortunately that month just told me that I didn't have a problem because I could quit. And granted, it did stop the acceleration of my changing brain chemistry, and it helped in that way. But thank God I didn't have any underlying emotional trauma that I was dealing with. I was raised in an extremely healthy, open, honest, and direct family, and that is such a huge thing, Doug.
Yeah, no question about that. What was it that got you? I mean, did you eventually get off and avoid alcohol and drugs? It was cocaine that was one of your problems altogether. I mean, if you did, what got you to stop? You remember?
Well, let me paint a little scenario for you. Just picture the judge looking down at me and asking me what I did for a living.
Yeah.
I hemmed and hawed. I felt like Ralph Cramden. Hamana. Your Honor, I'm an addictions therapist. And he looked at me over his cheaters, and I said, I know what you're thinking. I know exactly what you're thinking. You've heard this a million times, but you've never, ever heard it from me. And I want to tell you something, Your Honor. I am done. I am done. And I think I have growled at this man. And he looked at me over his cheaters again, and he said, well, I tend to believe you, Mr. Diebold, though we have a process. It was the most embarrassing day of my entire life, and I promised myself, I promised God, I promised his judge, I'm done, and that was it. Now, if I had crossed over into dependency, I wouldn't have been able to do it without help. I wouldn't have been able to just decide, because the brain chemistry would have just changed too much, and I couldn't have done it like that. I would have had to really get some support system going, maybe the 12-step AA program and all of that. So that indicated that my brain chemistry hadn't changed to the degree where I was now dependent on it.
Well, you were lucky, I presume.
I was lucky.
Yeah, no question about it.
Well, in some ways, but I got it before it was too late.
Yeah. You woke up. Well, good for you.
Yeah.
And good for the judge. Just for my information, did he let you off, or did he give you some severe penalty of one sort or another?
No, we went to trial. I was found not guilty of extreme, of regular. I was found guilty of misdemeanor DUI to the slightest degree. And in all honesty, that's the way it should have gone. I've kept my promise, and I'm done. I've experienced it, the abuse and how it can make your life chaotic. We have an expression in this business, you've got to be sick and tired of being sick and tired. And for some it happens a little earlier, some it happens a little bit too late.
Yes, no question about it. Well, I've always thought that it really helps for someone who does what you do to know what your clients have experienced or are going through. It's hard to tell someone to get off drugs if you've never had the problem. At least I feel that way. I could be totally wrong, but I think.
Well, no, Doug, you're absolutely right. I ask my clients all the time. Does it make a difference that I've struggled with some of this? And they make a pretty intelligent statement when they say, "Yeah, it's good to know that you know what this feels like, not what this thinks like, but how this feels." Well,
let's get to the point of what got you doing this business of counseling. I know you have a degree in sociology, in cultural diversity. which is, that I could ask you to explain what that is, and communications. How did you go from that kind of a degree and work in those fields into what you're doing now, counseling?
Well, the concept was, go to where the need is most. So I wound up being a youth supervisor and then a counselor for the Department of Corrections. There's not many people that want to help in this basically dangerous environment. But either I've got an extra screw loose, or I was too stupid to know what I was. But I went in and I worked with 5 different street gang kids in the juvenile division. And on the one hand, they're dangerous because they basically came from an untrained environment, usually urban, almost always urban.
Right.
And on the other hand, Doug, they're just kids. They're kids that didn't get what you and I got as middle class people. They didn't get it.
The upbringing, yeah. I know.
The upbringing, the discipline. Yeah. Yep.
Well,
and discipline is important. I think you'd agree with that.
As you've written, you had to learn how to survive and conquer your fear every day while you're doing that with those youths, street gangs and stuff like that were in prison. That was tough. But eventually, obviously, you decided to become an addiction counselor. How long ago was that? How long have you been doing this now?
Well, basically since the 70s.
Okay.
On and off, mostly on since the 70s.
All right. You've got a lot of experience in this. For those folks who are listening who whose families have a problem, or maybe they have a problem themselves, let's talk about what happens when they come to you, to your practice, Diebold Behavioral Counseling in Mesa, Arizona.
Actually, Scottsdale, Arizona.
You're in Scottsdale. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
In the shadow of Superstition Mountain, right?
Well, Mesa's a little closer to that shadow, but it's a big shadow.
Yeah, it is a big shadow. Yes, I know.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk what happens when I often say that it takes a lot of courage to pick up the phone and call someone like you and say I need help. What happens when someone comes to you for a session? And let's get this out of the way first. But I know you do this obviously in person a lot. But do you also have other forms of way you can help people? I mean, do you work with people on telephone or in Skype or things like that, or is it really always best to do this in person?
Well, it is always best to have that face-to-face dynamic, but I've also had some really nice breakthroughs over the phone. I have done work on Skype, but I have found that can be a little distracting. I'm not sure why, but I find it a little bit distracting. But I found that the phone can work very nicely also.
All right. Well, let's talk about what happens in a session with you. First off, what brings people to you? Do you know? I mean, there are a lot of places, that people could go for this kind of help. What brings them to you, do you think?
Well, in all honesty, I think I've done a good job with the website. I got a call this morning from a girl who said, I thought your website was fantastic. You seemed just right for me. And, just right is being real. It's being open. It's being honest. And, there's got to be some clarity in there, too. But people have to have a good feeling that the potential for trust is there, so they can open up and say everything they feel, holding nothing back, and also feeling that they won't be judged. I tell them almost immediately, Doug, that you won't be here because I'm not qualified, and I'm not going to be qualified until I'm perfect. So we have some time here, so to speak.
Okay. What shape are most people when they come to you, your clients? I mean, are they obviously it's the breaking point almost for them, isn't it, when they finally get up enough courage to come see someone like you?
No, you're right. That's a really good insight, Doug. They're pretty desperate. Quite often, their spouse has told them, "You either get some help or I'm out of here."
Right.
That's about 60% of the time, if I was to just guess. And they are desperate. They've got to make a change. You take heroin dependence. After a few months to a year, you don't even get high from heroin any longer if you've been using it regularly. It's kind of the ultimate bait and switch. You used to at least get high. You thought you could control it. I won't become dependent because I'm going to watch this like a hawk, and the typical rationalization. But the brain chemistry just changes quicker than you can imagine. You can have a full-blown addiction from heroin in a week.
Wow.
Imagine
and be
that.
totally hooked.
A week.
Wow.
Totally hooked.
What?
Yep.
What?
And you're hooked when you have really impactful withdrawals, where you're all of a sudden for the first time you're going, "Oh my God, I didn't see this coming, man. It's only been a short period of time. I could have never guessed it would have gone like this." But that's what happens when we don't know what we don't know.
So how do you go about helping these people? And by the way, in your experience, what do you find is the most difficult kind of addiction to deal with? Is it heroin or hard drugs, or is it alcohol? I'm gonna throw you a curveball here. Okay.
It's actually tobacco.
I just said that. Yeah, some people say smoking is the toughest.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Interesting.
I'm sorry.
No.
That's a tough one. It's a tough one. But my clients, again, they're desperate. Their life is falling apart, and one of the first things I try to communicate is that you're going to have to surrender to this process, and you're going to have to do it my way. My way includes nothing that isn't sanctioned by the Board of Behavioral Health and the behavioral health community. I found some things that work a little bit better than some of the traditional things for a specific patient, and every client has a customized treatment plan because we were all raised a little bit differently.
Well, what you're dealing with is really interesting, and it's a fascinating field that you're in. How do you help people? What do you do? Give me a clue as to if I were to come to you, what would happen?
Well, the first thing I always say is, as you mentioned earlier, thank you for having the courage to pick up what we call the 300-pound phone and ask for help. We're down here to help each other, and let's face it, there's givers and there's takers, and there's every combination of person in between. But I've got behavioral health therapists know what to do because we know the history of what has worked, what hasn't worked, and you've got to build a trusting relationship with a counselor and therapist so you can say anything and just let it fly. And again, we customize a treatment plan that almost always includes a 12-step program, whether it's Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous. It isn't mandatory. There are clients that I have that can do it without that. But generally, when you're fighting that, you're allowing your ego to kind of take control of things, and that will lead you to relapse more often than not.
Do you find you're able to help people dealing with them, and they are remaining at home in their in their current living surroundings? I've heard so often that people, it's recommended that they go away to a facility. Sometimes it's a rehab facility for 30 days. There are others who say 30 days is not nearly enough. You got to go away for a couple of months. I guess it all depends on the individual and how they're receiving the treatment and the guidance they get. But when folks come to you, are you able to sufficiently help them and get them straightened out without the requirement of going into a rehab facility? How have you found that to be?
if the client is able to handle outpatient level, then it becomes obvious that they don't need a 30-day program. But quite oftentimes they'll be doing pretty well, and then all of a sudden they'll relapse a few times in a row, and at that point it becomes obvious that they need a higher level of care. So you recommend a 30-day program or whatever it's deemed necessary, and then we continue the care after that program with outpatient once again.
Okay. Well, obviously that would be the sensible thing to do, to come back and work with you after they've done a program like that. What kind of modalities do you use with your clients when they come to you? Let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, because each individual's conditioning has been a little bit different. I guess the operant word is operant conditioning. I would say that I use an eclectic approach, but more often than not, I always use cognitive behavioral, because it really points out stinking thinking modalities. And once we straighten out the stinking thinking, we're going to change our behavior, and we're going to feel good about those changes. So we've now affected two brains, the cognitive or human, and the mammalian brain, which is at the base of the skull in the back, which deals with the limbic system and emotion primarily. You can have a parent and a child in the room, and the parent looks at me, and this was one of my clients, and said, DJ, what's the matter with him? He got caught smoking pot again, and he's going to blow his scholarship. And I look at her and I say, you ask me why he's doing it? Because he feels like it. He already knows on a cognitive level that it's a stupid idea that he take this joint and take a hit off of it. But he doesn't feel like listening to that logic. We have three separate brains, the cognitive, the mammalian, and the reptilian, which is fight, flight, or freeze. And they're separate, but they're also overlapped maybe by 15 or 20%. But quite often there's a tug of war. We see on the news all the time the next door neighbor going, oh my God, are you telling me that this man killed his whole family? And yes, that is true. I was just talking to him. I talk to him 3 times a week. Not only is he a pretty sharp guy, but he seems to be a pretty nice guy. Well, one day he couldn't handle his stressors. He didn't have the skills, and he didn't seek help. And he snapped, and there's no going back. We've got to take a realistic look at our stressors. How are we doing? Do we feel loved? Number one, do we feel loved? And if we don't, whose fault is it? Was I raised in a family where I took everything personally, and somehow I missed the fact that mom and dad are a mess? They're doing drugs and alcohol, and the flip side of that coin is parents are blamed, but they're not trained. I mean, you need a course to take a driver's license, but not to have a child.
It's true. That's very true. Yeah.
Right.
It's so difficult, I would think, to get somebody off of an addiction like heroin, as you point out, or alcohol. Obviously, these folks have to be very, very honest with you, and you've got to get to really know them. How often do you deal with them? I mean, is it like a psychiatrist? It's once a week for an hour. You come and sit and talk with each other, or are you available for them whenever they need that help? They're being tempted to take another drink or whatever it is. Are they free to call you? It's so tough to shake these kind of things.
No, they are free to call me, but I would prefer that they were attending an AA or NA, and that they have the safety valve really is their sponsor, and he's supposed to drop whatever he's doing in the moment. Right. And you get the phone call. there was a Michael Keaton movie that called Clean and Sober that does a very good job. It's a little dated, but the basics are all still there. You've got to have a safety valve. The good news is that cravings rarely last longer than 15 or 20 minutes, but you've got to do a good job of picking up that phone when you need to right away. Immediately call your sponsor, or I tell them, if your sponsor's out of town, call me. I mean, I only have one phone number, Doug, and it's my cell phone. I don't want my clients jumping through hoops to hear my voice, and I have to say, over the years, they've been terrifically responsible with that. They don't call me for willy-nilly things. They'll call me when they really need help.
Well, that's very good to know. I haven't mentioned this, but I need to point out your website. People can get in touch with you and find out more information. You have a really great website. It is, by the way, DieboldBehavioralCounseling.com. And Diebold is spelled D-I-E-B-O-L-D, DieboldBehavioralCounseling.com. And again, DJ is located in Scottsdale, Arizona. And if you go to the website, you'll get his email. His phone number is there, and you can easily communicate with him. I wanted to mention, I saw here you were inspired to become a counselor by your mother. You wrote a book called Through Charlotte's Eyes. What was that book about?
Well, it's basically about the things that I learned, and I certainly don't try to highlight things that aren't important. The important things that I learned about life through her eyes, basically, and with all the phenomenal people I've met in this business and in life in general, she's certainly the most evolved person naturally that I have ever met. I'm shocked and humbled by the fact that I was allowed to be born into her family. She was just something else, Doug. Yeah. She was, as my father used to say, she was a piece of work.
Very good. I guess that book, by the way, Through Charlotte's Eyes, is that available? I mean, like through Amazon or something like that?
Exactly. The best place is probably Amazon.com.
Yeah, all right.
People can contact me directly also for a signed copy.
Oh, very good. That's good to know. Listen, we have 2 minutes left. Very quickly, can you give me a typical success story? Someone who came to you that they've really managed to succeed and get rid of that addiction?
Oh my God, that's one of the most fun parts of my job. I could give you probably 20 off the top of my head.
Give me one, real
it's rare
quick.
because. Oh, her name is Janet, and she was addicted to opiates. She started with traditionally with prescription painkillers from mom and dad's medicine cabinet when she had a hangover one time, and all of a sudden went right to euphoria. And I got a call from her not too long ago, and she's a teacher now, and she embarrasses me. She says I changed her life, and I tell her, no, I just laid it out there like a buffet table. You had the choice to eat some of it, to eat all of it, to eat none of it, and by little, you did all the work. I just pointed some things out here and there.
That must make you feel so great to be able to do that and get that kind of response from people. I know how you must feel. Listen, we've run out of time. Our guest has been DJ Diebold. He's headquartered out in Scottsdale, Arizona. Check out his website, Diebold, D-I-E-B-O-L-D, behavioralcounseling.com, and you will be able to get his email address and learn how to contact him. By the way, DJ will be back with us again next week at this same time. So join us again so you can hear more of the amazing story of how he helped so many people. DJ, this has been really great. Thank you for your time. We appreciate it, okay?
Thank you, Doug. You made this painless.
Oh, come on. You're very welcome. It's been great. I enjoy going into the subjects like this. It's interesting, very interesting indeed. Okie dokes, everybody. That's it for now. I'm Doug Llewelyn. Have a great day wherever you are. See you next time right here on Close Up Talk Radio. Bye for now.